Hi, you're listening to Crime Scene Today. We are coming to you from the International Association for Identification Conference in Reno. And this is a conference in which crime scene investigators and forensic discipline experts all get together to share new techniques and technologies among the world. We have 24 countries represented at this conference, and we're lucky enough to have one of those experts here to talk to us about a specific topic that I know that many people have great interest in. So Everett, thank you for joining us. If you could tell us a little bit of your background and where you work, those things.
My name's Everett Baxter. I'm a sergeant with the crime scene unit for Oklahoma City Police Department. I've been in that unit for about 16 plus years. Also do some private consulting and training and teaching. And I had numerous training classes around the country in crime scene investigation, bloodstain pattern analysis, shooting reconstruction, crime scene reconstruction, and drones.
And that's what we're here to talk about today. So drones have become very popular among citizens and just aerial photography and those things in general, but we certainly have found a use and need for them in police work. We have a little bit more limitations as the public has concerns of privacy issues and Fourth Amendment rights and those type of things. We get put on with a little bit more restrictions on what we can use them for, or regulations on what we have to do before we can fly one, and those type of things. They certainly have come down in price from when drones first started. So if you could just sort of walk us through the differences between, I guess, the public and the new regulations have come out and what a department has to do to actually, I guess, be certified or be authorized to operate a drone.
So once you essentially establish a drone procedure, most of your agencies will develop an SOP that they will follow. The FAA has quite a bit of guidelines that are out there that are available, certain such, airspace restrictions that you cannot get into. And they even go into the limitations and examining your aircraft, just like a pilot would get before you get on a Southwest Airlines flight going from Houston to out here to Reno. They inspect their planes. You'll do the inspection. So there's some processes that you need to have an SOP set up that limits you or tells you what you're going to do. And those have to follow the guidelines. Once you have some of that established and set up, then the second step is establishing your pilots. These individuals that fly those drones must study and take a test through the FAA. It's referred to as a Part 107 certificate. So the FAA does not give licenses or a pilot's license. It's a certificate. So once you have that, it is the pilot's responsibility to ensure that they are flying safely, that they're flying within particular areas. So the FAA has restricted airspace in some places. If you're going to fly in a crime scene within a restricted airspace, law enforcement has to get authorization to do that. There's several easier ways now for law enforcement to do that. There's another way that we can go through and make a phone call. There's a special number that a law enforcement agent can contact the FAA directly, give them their information, where they're going to fly, and they will grant them authorization to fly that mission at that particular time. If you're outside of those general airspace authorization areas, and you're in what we refer to as a Class G airspace, then there's no authorization required. You still have to be safe. You still have to pay attention and make sure that you see any aircraft that's flying by. An unmanned aircraft must give way to a manned aircraft. So you have a helicopter flying around your area, you're going to have to land. You're going to have to get out of the way. So once you have those processes set up, then it's kind of what the department wants to look at. Who is going to be running that particular program, who's going to set it up and get it running and be the one essentially responsible for that program.
Now, you talked about the restricted airspace and unrestricted. So now, as far as the public, they have to follow the same rules. They can't go into restricted airspace either.
Correct. And actually, as of, I believe, the middle or end, somewhere in there in May, a hobbyist, someone who is just going to go out and fly just to have fun, are now required to take a short knowledge test that is essentially given by the FAA.
So it's not the same test that officers have to take.
Or any pilot has to take.
Right.
Correct. There's restrictions now for folks that are out flying with just a hobbyist side. You're going to have to take a test. You're going to have to register your drone. So these are things that, again, these agencies are going to go through. They're going to register the drone. They're going to have pilots. They're going to have these SOPs put in place.
So there's many uses for the drones. Why we've started picking them up, and so now I know that there's a wide range of pricing on these things, and some that can carry loads and such like that. So what have you seen some of the drones used for police wise at this point?
There are some that they're tactical units. The SWAT teams, some refer to them as that, but the TAC teams, they'll have a standoff. So they'll have a barricaded subject inside a house or inside an area. A lot of times these tactical units will breach a window or a door or something to throw in a phone or something to try to make contact with the person inside. So they normally have some opening. So one use of the drones, a smaller, cheaper model, is to actually fly that drone through that opening and see what's on the other side. Get you an idea, it gives you a visual. One of the gentlemen that was at this particular conference, they talk about breaching doors. So instead of, sometimes having officers go in, you'll breach a door and send a drone in. So you're reducing the liability, or not necessarily liability, but you're reducing the
risk of your officers.
Risk of the officers, correct.
Right.
So one of the projects that I did setting up for this particular conference is I flew a drone at 300 feet. You can't hear it. Took me 8 minutes to fly it. It was about actual area that I had was probably a good, I'm going to say 800-900 feet wide by about 11 or 1,200 feet. So it's a big area. Took me 8 minutes to fly it, put it into a software, a photogrammetry software like Pix4D. Took me about 20 minutes to get a three-dimensional product. So if I have a TAC team that is needing information or whatever, they want to do a layout, they want to sketch, I can generate them a almost 2-scale three-dimensional diagram in 30 minutes. How long does it take them normally to get there, to get all their stuff set up? You do this pretty quickly, and you have a diagram, and it's 2 scales. So if there's a drainage ditch or a slope to a road, that shows up in your three-dimensional product. Some of the stuff that you can also do is export a 3D PDF. So I could give these people a PDF version of it, and they can look at it from various different computers if they need to. So you can use that. We have crime scene investigation. So we have an outdoor crime scene. So we go out and we'll fly a scene. We can document evidence that way. Another process is crashes, automobile collisions, car-train collisions. There is a plethora of uses of the drone for law enforcement, and the other use is surveillance. There are some drones out there that are capable of being put in an air over a mile away. The cameras that they have, an outdoor crowd that is gathering in an intersection, we can monitor those from sometimes a half to a mile away, just by the use of that drone, and that reduces the risk of those officers. It puts them out. How can we then respond to that. It gives you another eye and another vision to see how a supervisor may send officers in to diffuse a situation that it gives the least amount of risk to the public and the least amount of risk to the officers.
Now, we've seen, and you touched on many of them, we've seen the use of drones at events, such we have a big one in our area, Ironman, the triathlon that we do, and many people come to that. So I know that a lot of people have events where they'll launch this where you get a view, and these are things that in the past, if we wanted to do an aerial type of view of that nature, we had to use real helicopters, which are massively expensive to operate, run, maintain. The same thing for looking for missing persons and searching for suspects hiding in an area. All of these things we used to use the large helicopters for and those type of things. So we have reduced that need. Now many of these drones will fit in a patrol car. They could be launched in the field. So, but one thing that you touched on here, obviously we're at a crime scene conference and you touched on a little bit as far as documentation. We have many things to document. We use our video cameras and we use our photography on scenes and sketches and those type of things. And we even have some, 3D scanners and that. But what you presented on today is actually using the drone to not only take photographs, not only get those aerial views, but to actually turn that into a scan of the area and to be able to take measurements. So what's the process in doing that?
So the software that I use, the photogrammetry software, is Pix4D. It is one of the most widely used softwares in the area. It's mainly designed for agriculture and surveying type processes. It has now made its way into the public safety sector, the law enforcement, so what it does is it takes photographs and it essentially takes the various pixels or the various points and it makes one photograph into thousands or hundreds of thousands of points. The GPS that is tagged in the data on those photographs is used to scale it. So you can't just take one photograph and go out there and get you a three-dimensional sketch. Some of the projects that I flew for the lecture that I had here entailed 544 photographs. Some of them are 200 photographs. So what you want to do is you've got to have an overlap of the photographs, both from the front and the side. So you want to have about a 70 to 80% overlap. So you're going to fly overhead. Typically you think about maybe 100 to 150 feet is for the crime scene side is typically your best height that you're going to be able to get. You're going to be above the tree level. Most areas, trees are a little bit below now. Here in Nevada, especially around the Reno area, some of those trees are 80 and 90 feet tall. So you're gonna have to adjust that. 300 feet isn't gonna. I really shouldn't need to fly around 300 feet. So if I can fly a little bit lower, 100, 150 feet, and take those photographs, I'm able to put those photographs into the software, and it produces a very to-scale diagram, a three-dimensional diagram of what I have.
Now, does it, you plug these photos in, does it automatically? Is there how hard is it to use the software? Do you really need to be, tech savvy to pull this off? How difficult is it?
Well, you need some training. So, like with anything else in law enforcement, you need to have some proper training. The software is really not that difficult to use. So some of the processes you go through is that if you fly a scene, and let's say that some of the photos didn't quite line up. So I've had a couple where one or two of the parking lot lane lines in a project I flew was 90 degrees. Well, that's not a street. That's not a parking lot. So I went in and used manual tie points, and I picked out specific points within that scene, and I brought that back down into a more processing where it's actually what it looks like. So I've had some where I've had to put 30 or 40 tie points. Some of the projects that I flew today, one of them I used 3 tie points, one of them I used 19 tie points, and most of them I didn't use any tie points at all.
Now, when you're referring to a tie point, that's something that links one series of photos to others or measurements to others?
Correct. So let's say you have a mailbox. Okay, so at the top of the mailbox, typically at the street, when they close, there is some point, some corner. What I'll do is I'll find something of a common area like on that mailbox, and that will become a tie point. And so in the software, when I choose a photo and I say I want to use this as a tie point, then I find it in a second photo, and then once I click an apply button, the software will tell me and pull out every photograph that tie point, that particular point is in. And then I go through there and manually make sure that those points are where they are. So sometimes they may be, a millimeter or 2 millimeters off. Sometimes they're feet off. So that's where you'll bring them back in to to essentially tie them together.
Now, you talked about your flight time, and to clarify, when you say you took 500 photos, obviously you're not having to push a button 500 times to take this. You set something on the drone to set how many photographs over time, or how does that work?
So you have a couple options. Some folks will fly in what they refer to as a Pix 4D capture app, and that's essentially an automated system where you define a grid, a double grid. You define a height that you want to fly it at, and then essentially from there you say start, and the app starts the aircraft, it takes off, it flies the grid, it takes the pictures, and then it returns it and lands. Well, the other option is, and this is what a lot of pilots will do when they're flying their drones, is they will manually fly it. So they'll fly over and I'll set it to take a photograph every 2 seconds. And then I will manually fly in a grid myself. So I'm not necessarily pushing the button, although you can. If you didn't want to do the every 2 seconds, you could manually push those photographs if you wanted to.
All 540 times, right?
Or how many ever you need. I've had some that was in the neighborhood of 800-900 photographs. So you can. There are some things that you can use the software and let it do now. So sometimes if I fly through I have a Mavic 2 Pro. So if I fly through the DJI GoPro app, that is available. DJI also has a DJI Pilot, so you'll fly the Matrice 210s, the more expensive drones, the ones that have the ability to zoom in from 1 mile to 1.5 miles away. That does not, at this time, have the ability to take a photograph every 2 seconds. So if you're flying the Matrice 210 through the DJI Pilot app, yes, you're going to have to push that button yourself.
So now in talking about, because obviously the Matrice would be a more expensive model, so if I'm an agency that obviously we always are concerned about our budget, no matter how big or small your agency is, but if I'm a smaller agency and I would like to use this for crime scene, what's a basic set? I mean, what can I get away with, whether it's the DJI Mavic or can the Spark work? I mean, what other options do they have?
You got to think about your conditions that are around you, okay? And that's going to be a big key. So let's say that you have some pretty significant wind speeds. Even though the Spark and the Mavic 2 Pro and all of these fly off of GPS, the smaller the drone is, the more it's susceptible to wind that's going to, from greater wind speeds. So if I have continuously having, 30 and 40 mile an hour winds,
So like if you're in Amarillo, then
Yes, sir. There you go. Yes, then you probably want a little bit bigger drone. Now, when we talk about the camera capabilities and the video capabilities, would the Spark work? Sure, it will. It would work just fine, but you don't want to launch an aircraft and then have a 60-mile-an-hour gust wind and it blow into a car on the highway. You got to be able to control your aircraft. So that's where the bigger aircrafts come in. I fly, like I said, a Mavic 2 Pro. I have had no issues in some really gusty winds. I've flown it in 30 and 35 mile an hour gust winds, and I've not had any issues with it.
So I guess the next step up from the Mavic, and actually I think they've sort of come together now as they've advanced, but I guess the next step up was the Phantom. I know they had like the Phantom 3. I think they're on the 4 now. Is there any advantage from the next step up?
Well, that's a question DJI is going to have to answer, because from what I'm understanding, the Phantom is on back order, so to speak. They're not selling them anymore. They're not saying that they're taking them away, but they're not selling them anymore. So I think one of the areas that came in was that Mavic 2 Pro was such a much better aircraft. It's got just as good a camera and video as the Phantom, but the stability of that aircraft kind of may have put the Phantom line out of work.
Well, and if memory serves me right, the Mavic is also the one that you can fold up.
Correct.
So it's a little bit more. I've seen photographers throwing it in a backpack versus that's not capable on the Phantom model. That's a pretty big aircraft.
Correct. And some of the other things that folks have done, and I didn't mention this in the lecture today, but think about you have a drone. Okay, can I bring this drone into this room? And we're in a fairly big lecture hall. It's probably 30 feet tall. It's 20, maybe 30 by 30 by 30. It's a pretty big square. Instead of flying the drone, can I leave it folded and use the aircraft photographs? So can I take photographs with my drone, fold it up, not flying it in an area, and still get my photographs? Sure you can. I mean, there's a plethora of uses for those things.
Now, one thing that you had talked about, one of your scenes that you were on, and I'm curious about, you had, I believe it was an officer-involved shooting, if I'm correct, that you had used the drone to map it out, but then you also were able to take that into virtual reality, which has also become very useful and popular, and use that to allow someone to walk through the crime scene. So what was the process in that?
So in this particular process, we used a couple of different documentation techniques and tools. One of them was a total station. When I do shooting documentation, especially trajectory rods, going through bullet defects and whatnot, I like to use a total station in reflectorless mode. It is in the reflectorless mode. It's probably the most accurate measuring method that's out there.
Now, to pause for a second, just so people that may not know, I know in the industry we just know it by heart, total station, but that would be a survey piece of equipment like you see on the side of the road for them to measure distance and level, and it's what you see construction workers using. We've used it for accident reconstruction for years, but that's what it's called.
Correct. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So you utilize that technique and you use that tool. Then we flew the particular scene, the whole, from the north end of the crime scene to the south end of the crime scene, and we were able to fly that. And in that particular process, I think he took just a little under 300 photographs. It took him 40 minutes to fly it. Some of the processes that I had him fly around some of the vehicles that were a little bit lower so you can get better documentation. So there was some additional processes. So then we take that particular information and we generate an output. We call it a point cloud. We take that point cloud. The point cloud is millions of points that are, each point is in the correct and true XYZ points. So they are in the correct three-dimensional location of where they are. You take those point clouds, you import it into another particular program, import the total station data, put those two outputs, put them together or register them. And then from that particular process, I'm able to do what they refer to as immersive 3D diagramming. It's virtual reality. You get the goggles, you put the goggles on, and then you walk back through. So you're walking through a two-scaled, essentially, diagram that was taken from photographs in a total station.
So now, is this something that the software that you already spoke of, that you put your drone points in, is that the same thing that can create the virtual reality, or is there separate software that you need for that?
At this time, there's a separate software. The software that I use for that one is Zone 3D, and it's the advanced version. So they make two versions of that, a basic version. You can do three-dimensional scale or sketches and that type of stuff. You just can't import a point cloud and work in the virtual reality side. So the advanced version, I put everything in. I get my essentially my sketch, my scene map, how I want it. And then once you have that done, the next process is utilizing the equipment. So that's the other thing, is you got to have equipment to go through and get ready to get you into the virtual reality.
So, and you spoke of, I know Faro has the software, but obviously Faro also has their scanning station, which does the 3D scan of millions of points. And I know one of their competitors, Leica, that we've used before. What do you feel the advantage of using a drone versus one of these 360 scanners, or do you feel that they complement each other, or you can use one without the other?
My opinion on scanners, drones, your disto laser, whatever you're doing to measure, they're all tools. And how do you want to utilize that tool? So can I take a drone and fly a scene and get the same product essentially that a scanner's going to get in maybe a third of the time? Sometimes maybe a tenth of the time. If I fly a little bit closer, do what we refer to as, we call it a point of interest. So it's flying essentially a circle around a particular area and taking numerous photographs. It's a tool. The scanner is a tool. Each one of them have limitations, and some of them have times where you just can't use it. So I have a Mavic 2 Pro. It's not waterproof. So when it starts raining, I can't fly. The Matrice 210, that's about a $35,000 drone. With all the equipment and everything that you have on there, it's waterproof.
That's also when you got to push the button 580 times to take the photos, right?
Correct. But the other thing is that the Matrice 210 also has a really good FLIR camera on it. So instead of getting your helicopter up, it's raining, we're looking for a missing person, I can launch that Matrice 210 and I can search a field using the FLIR, which is the same heat-seeking device that you're in your helicopters. So it does, for crime scene, the Matrice 210 is way overkill. It's a drone that is just going to do more than I need.
So now, does the Matrice come with the flare, or is that something that it just can carry that load and you put a flare camera on it?
It comes with one camera, and then you add on additional cameras. So the camera, if you're wanting to zoom in for over a mile away, that's an add-on camera. The Matrice 210 has a payload, so it can carry some additional cameras. Some of those cameras run in the neighborhood of $10,000, $15,000. So the Matrice 210 is really not about $35,000. It's probably neighborhood of 12 to 15 grand. But then the camera
all the accessories, all the accessories.
Those. So if you get a decked out Matrice 210, you're looking at 35 grand. That's going to have it's going to have a good camera on it. It's going to have a good maybe a flare. The other thing that you got to consider when you're doing your drone program, and I didn't mention this earlier, is the batteries. So Mavic 2 Pro has a battery that I have 31 minute flight time. So you go fly your scene. It takes about 2, 3, 4 hours to charge that battery back up so that you're ready to fly again. So you need multiple batteries. So for the Mavic 2, you're looking at about $150 to $175 per battery. The Matrice 210 requires 2 batteries per flight. So I take that thing off. If I want to have the same flight time, I'm going to, instead of having 4 batteries, I need to have 8 batteries to get almost the same flight time as my Mavic 2 Pro.
Now, the chargers that they come with, do they charge more than one at a time, or do you have to buy additional chargers or accessories to charge more than one at a time?
Mine has the ability to charge 4 at a time. They do have additional chargers that will charge multiple. So it kind of just depends. If you buy a third-party charger, you may be able to charge every single battery you have.
So I know one of the capabilities of cameras that's always judged on video is low light. So how do you find that the drones operate at nighttime in low light situations?
I have taken a photograph at a 2-second exposure. The Mavic 2 Pro has the ability to take an 8-second exposure. These cameras aren't just attached to the aircraft, they're attached to what they call a gimbal. So that allows that camera to be stabilized. And that's part of the aircraft, that's part of what comes with your aircraft. So if you didn't have that gimbal, then just to simply flying, you would have a noise and vibration in your photographs. So you're able to take these photographs, 4 or 5 second exposure. Lighted conditions, you're going to have to slow down a little bit. So you want to make sure that the aircraft stops when you take the picture. If it's a very well lit area, you may not have to slow down much at all. But if it's a darker area, there's not much street lights or available light, you may have to slow down quite a bit more just to document that area.
Now, how much control do you have over the camera? Can you adjust typical things like ISO, shutter, overexpose, underexpose, those type of things?
Yes. I can go to completely manual mode, just like the digital SLR cameras that most law enforcement use. That drone has those same capabilities. I can adjust the ISO. I can do an exposure compensation. I can set the shutter speed. So if I want to go down to 8 seconds to 4,000th of a second, I can set that. I have a little bit on the diaphragm or the f-stop that you kind of limited in what you're going to because of the camera, but the other functions you can set them.
Now these photos, obviously taking so many photos and video, it takes up a lot of room, and when you start talking about 3D imaging, that requires some computing power, and I know you touched on that. So obviously you're not buying the $200 cheap laptop from computer store and pulling this off. So what's needed on the end user for documenting this?
The best documentation process, if you had a desktop computer, those really, when you're looking at gaming type stuff, it's going to outperform a laptop. Now, saying that, I have an MSI gaming laptop. It's got a gaming video card on it, so it's going to.
And that's really something to look for. You refer to, gaming laptop. The fact that we're talking about video games these days, and that's really sort of the standard. There's so much 3D virtual reality imaging going on that they are pushing the limits of our video cards. They've had to create faster cards, faster processors. That really that's where the standard. That if you want the fastest, the most powerful computer for video graphics, you get a computer that is capable of playing the newest and fastest games.
Correct. Your memory also. I have 32 gigabyte of RAM. You really want about 64 gig of RAM memory. When I got my MSI laptop, I had a pretty good graphics card in it. It was the essentially the second best graphics card that they made. 8 months later, it's now probably in the neighborhood of the 25th. They've got a graphics card now that's got 11 gigabytes of video memory, which is probably 8 times what I have right now. And that, so the more video intensive you have, the more RAM you have, the more photographs you're able to take. So my laptop, if I have 200 photographs, 290 photographs, it takes me about 8 or 9 minutes to register the first stage. I've got some where I've had 950 photographs, and it's taken me 4.5 hours to register or to go through that first stage.
So now when you talk about the different stages that you have to do, how much work are you doing? How much time are you having to put into it before you hit that button on the computer for the computer power to take over and do what it needs to do?
The initial part is you're setting up the account. So it's just anything else. Here's what I'm going to call this particular project. You give it a name. You're going to go through and set all of that information up. You're going to then import the photographs into the software so that it can begin to do the process. Once you get that set up, and it takes, depending on how many photographs you want to load up, it may take as much as 5 seconds. It may take a couple of minutes. Once you get that done, you finish that, then you start the processing. Once you go through the processing, so there's 3 stages, you want to process each stage separately. So you start out with stage 1. Once you say process, you walk away. There's nothing else that the user needs to be doing. So for that one project I was talking about that was 4 hours, I wasn't sitting there playing with it for 4 hours. I hit it and then I walked away.
So now when you come back after it's done what it does for what you call stage 1, what's your next step in the process?
So then I want to review the particular product. Is the points and what they have is thousands and thousands of tie points that the photographs that created. So I want to make sure that when I'm looking at those particular tie points, is it correct? So if I have 2 layers in my project, then I'm going to have to use manual tie points. So that particular process, going into manual tie points, that's going to take some time. That's actually setting in the computer, looking at a particular point on your tie points, and then figuring out in the photographs where it is and making sure that they line up. So one of the projects took me 1.5 days to do manual tie points.
Now, would that be an average time, or that was just a special project? I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is if someone wants to invest in this, what are they pretty much looking at on a typical, not that we have a typical, but a typical accident, a typical crime scene, not an elaborate one?
Some of that's going to depend on the pilot. So if you have an individual that has really no understanding of what you're needing in the photographs, they're not going to do the proper process. So take, for example, you got a fatal crash scene. So you fly at 150 feet, and you're flying around at 150 feet, and then you drop down to 25 feet, and you're flying around both cars. They're pretty much stuck together. So you're going to fly around that. Well, you have a 100-foot and a 25-foot. In Pix 4D, a lot of times it'll look at that and it'll may consider that two separate scenes, and it'll duplicate your project. So you look in there, it looks like you're seeing double. Well, the problem is that the pilot didn't connect the two scenes. So when they were dropping from 100 feet to 25 feet, what they should do is just take a series of photographs as they're dropping down. So you take the same 70 to 80% overlap as you're dropping from 100 feet, slowly dropping to 25 feet, and then you fly around that. And you do your, what we call a point of interest. If you link the two or multiple elevations or altitudes that you're flying, then sometimes you tend to have less involvement. Most of the stuff that I have been playing around with, I've got minimal tie points. So if you fly it properly, you go out there and do what you need to do, and you link the various altitudes, your actual time where you're doing something at the computer is minimal.
So now, so we went from stage 1 to stage 2, and you said there's a final stage to this?
Well, once you get stage 1 done, okay, so if you need to fix something or correct something in stage 1, stage 1 is where you do that. Stage 2 is the point cloud and the triangle mesh. So if you just happen to run all three of them at the same time, and you go back and redo something in your first stage, it deletes second and third stage, so you waste a lot of time. So do them one stage at a time. Do stage 1. If there's something that needs to be fixed, fix it. So at the conference here, I did one where I used a video, where I used my cell phone. I went in with my iPhone 8 Plus, and I videotaped a hallway. Well, in stage 1, I measured a door that I knew was 6 feet apart. In the software, it was 19 feet apart. So I want to scale that in stage 1. If I scale it in stage 2, it's going to delete the point cloud, and it's going to get rid of it. So once I get the corrections done in stage 1, then I do the point cloud, okay, and it'll do the triangle mesh. So what a triangle mesh is, it takes 3 points, it draws a triangle with the 3 points that are next to each other, and it kind of colors them in. So if you got a lot of noise in your point cloud, you're going to see this god-awful blob that just looks horrible. So at that point, I'm going to go in and clean up my point cloud. And I did get my point cloud cleaned up, and then I could rerun the triangle mesh at that point. Once you get that done, the final stage is a orthomosaic, which is a two-dimensional, two-scale representation of all of the photographs. Stage 3 is based off of the point cloud and the triangle mesh. So again, if you go back, stage 1, any problems you fix, you use that in stage 2. Any things that you need to fix in the point cloud in stage 2 is used for stage 3. So it allows you a step-by-step ability to fix it.
So now, once you've done stage 3, is there some export process? Do you have to use the software to view it, or what does it export it? So when it goes to the prosecution or defense, how do they manipulate that, or how do they view this, I should say?
There's several different outputs that they come out. So the stage 3, the orthomosaic, is a TIFF image. So we're familiar, you got JPEG, which is your typical compressed file that you have. Then you have a raw image, and then you have TIFF. TIFF's an uncompressed. Most of your photomosaics are several hundred megabytes. I've got one that's 800 and 900 megabytes. So I can't even open it up in Windows Photo. I've got to use a special, it's a free app to open up the TIFF image. I can give that to anybody they want. Stage 2, it generates a point cloud, and it typically, you can export it in whatever format you want. The normal exportation is a LAS. Once you get the triangle mesh and that done, you can export a 3D PDF. So I can give you a PDF document that you can go in and manipulate in 3-dimensional. That process, nobody needs any extra software. We use PDFs every day. So you take that PDF document, you open it up, you can manipulate that in 3-dimensional. You can zoom in on it.
So now, obviously, that's a little bit different than the virtual reality that you were talking about, where someone, I guess they use their phone, or I guess that's how most of the 3D headsets now. They put it on the phone and walk around with it, or how's that work?
When you're using in the crime scene side, you want a little bit greater technology. So we will actually put the goggles on your face. The phone stuff and the goggles that plug into your typical cell phones, the quality is not near as great that you're looking at. Plus, you're looking at the computer in your cell phones is just not capable of handling something this large that we have.
So what type of headset would you be using to handle something like that?
I have a Vive. They have an HTC Vive. There's an Oculus. These are about $400 or $500 to get the particular processes.
Now, I know that at least I believe it's the Oculus. They have one that requires you to be connected to a computer, and then I guess they have one that's freestanding. So I gather you could use both. But is the freestanding one that is not connected to a computer, is that capable of handling this type of imagery?
It's the computer that you're going to plug into. So if the actual computer itself isn't capable of handling, no, it won't. So that's, again, you're going to go back to that gaming type computer, the laptop, your desktop. If you have a gaming computer, and you got a pretty hefty gaming computer, then you can plug into it. So the ones that are standalone, those are typically wireless. So they're sending a signal to and from the computer. The computer is the one that's using it, and it's just sending the signal to your wireless headset. The one I have is wired into the computer, so you can move around a little bit.
So where do you see, obviously there's always advances in technology. As you said, 8 months goes by, your video card is obsolete. Where do you see this technology, this future being in law enforcement? Do you think that at this point, obviously it's usable, obviously it's great benefit. How do you see it improving here in the next couple of years or so?
Well, you think about this technology, this processes. We're always looking at various ways that we can teach people, we can train people, we can evaluate people. So can I go out and fly a drone in a crime scene, an outside parking lot? Can I set up a crime scene and create a virtual reality training facility? So now I want to test you, or I want to put you through an evaluation process. I can create a virtual reality training cycle, put you in that. You can go through, you can do measurements, you can essentially do photographs, video, you can take notes in virtual reality. I can record all this stuff and evaluate. So, I go teach a CSI class. Instead of having mock crime scenes that I have to develop and put together, I can do it in virtual reality. And then I can record it and we can review the process. So the way that law enforcement is going is technology. If you're not involved in technology, you're kind of falling behind. Drones, the ability and the information that we get from a drone, from a total station, from a scanner, it is enormous. And it's that information that you can then plug into the virtual reality. So the possibilities that law enforcement are getting into is extremely endless before we touch it. And I like that.
I agree. There's a lot of technology here. There's a lot of great knowledge here. I mean, I'm honored to be around such masters in this field, subject matter experts, many people that talk about their disciplines and are passionate about their disciplines. And it's just been an amazing time here with the knowledge and sharing that we do. We have a little bit of time as we wrap up, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about drones, educate everyone on how to implement this in their department. But you are also an author. You have written a book, and I just want to give you a moment to basically talk about your book, your classes, your consulting company, and how people would get in touch with you if they need a class or if they want to run a case by you that they need your expertise.
Well, I appreciate that. When I was starting,
Your expertise.
well, I appreciate that. When I was started teaching crime scene investigations courses, I wanted to provide the crime scene investigator with a resource that they could refer back to. So when I wrote the book, the publisher, the senior editor for CRC Press said, "This is the only book like that out there in crime scene investigation." So that was my primary goal. I wanted to get a tool for those people that do the job. And then as I was teaching classes, I got a kind of a secondary goal, and I did a little research. At the time I wrote the book, there was 21,500 law enforcement agencies in the United States. 80% of those law enforcement agencies are 20-person or smaller. Who's dealing with your evidence? These agencies have small budgets. They can't afford $800-900 training classes, but they can afford a book. And that was my secondary goal, was you buy a book for an agency, you're able to read it. So there's two books. There's a handbook, which is the general gist of how to process scenes, and then there's a workbook, and it gives you some kind of exercises to go through. You can kind of work through those, and there's photography exercises. There is exercises on lifting shoe prints, footwear impressions, those types of things. So it breaks down each category into its own chapter. So I also obviously I teach a 2-week 80-hour crime scene investigations course, where we use that book. Part of the tuition includes both copies of the book. We do a lot of photography, so we'll start out. You may end up taking somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 photographs in that 2-week time period. We're going to put a footwear impression in dirt. We're going to go through the photographing steps. So you're gonna go through the steps that you normally should. We'll lift fingerprints with different techniques. We will go through a gamut again of processing techniques. I also teach shooting reconstruction. I have a bloodstain pattern analysis course that I teach. All of these are available on my website, ebjrforensics.com. You can click a link. You can send me a contact page, and they'll give me your email information and through my website, and I can contact you from there.
And you have links to your books on that site also?
Correct.
Okay. And if they were to go to obviously CRC Press or Amazon, what would they type in to find your book? What's the title, and tell them your name again?
So my name's Everett Baxter Jr. The handbook, it's the Complete Crime Scene Investigation Handbook and the Complete Crime Scene Investigation Workbook. And those, again, they're available on a plethora of sites, Amazon, CRC Press.
Well, Everett, again, I appreciate you coming to talk to us about this, and certainly if anyone would like to bring Everett there for training in many of the disciplines he's an expert in, or if you want to reach out to him with an email and see if he can meet any needs you have at your department, we encourage you to reach out to him. So thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you, sir.